this mindset about how data needs to be stored, and understanding that when you're adopting one of these big vendors, you're literally like, they're not a good responsible data custodian. They are instead like literally locking your data away and holding it for ransom. So that thought, once it enters people's minds, and once they start looking at open alternatives and like more standard APIs and headless EHRs, and there's a lot of open source solutions that are really good today.
Hello and welcome to Clinical Changemakers. Today on the show we have Dr. Sidharth Ramesh. He's a medical doctor based in Bangalore, India, and he is the host of the Digital Health Hackers podcast, as well as the founder of the health IT company Medblocks. Dr. Sidharth Ramesh, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jono, how are you doing?
I'm great. It's a real pleasure to have you here today. I've actually followed your YouTube channel for a number of years, and you've taught me a lot about clinical informatics. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about clinical informatics and get into some of those expert topics that you've taught me over the years. Before we do, I'd be really curious to learn about your journey, starting out as a doctor, and were there any particular points in that career that kind of tipped you or enticed you to move into the kind of technology spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's more about like I was just tired of the whole thing more than being enticed by something specific. So I was, I finished my degree in India, and you had to do this 1 year mandatory residency program. So you have to be an intern, and you need to do all sorts of different chores. So one of the tasks that we were assigned was, you get up in the morning. So, and for 4 hours, you copy data from one digital application. You copy the lab reports from one application into another, because the hospital had no smarter way to do this, right? And that got me started. I was like, hey, we have computer programs that are able to do this automatically. And then in here, you are just like using these interns who they have an abundance of, by the way, to just manually copy data from one application into another. And I was like, that doesn't sound fair. So that's where I kind of like started applying a lot of my coding skills. Like I kind of knew how to code, but not really. So I like picked up a few more handbooks, and then I wrote a script that would automatically like copy data from this particular application and put this in another one. But then it kind of only worked in one of the computers, right? Like the one single computer that I was on. So before you know it, like there was a queue waiting in the wards every single day for that one computer. And sometimes I would be caught in the queue. Like it was something that I installed in that computer, but there were like 7 people waiting in front of me to copy lab reports for the patients assigned to them. I understood that, okay, there's something wrong here. Let's like try and approach the management and ask them like, hey, is there a better way to just do this one small thing? And again, it seems like a trivial issue, but then it took us like close to 3 to 4 hours, because there were close to 100 patients that we had to monitor. And just like for each patient, it took like 10 minutes to just like do that work. So it adds up really fast. So when I talked to them, they're like, not really. Like these are two different applications, and we had two different vendors. One vendor is not with us anymore. They've just like gone off the grid, so we don't know who built this application. So it was just hanging on a fine balance, and they didn't want to touch anything. No innovation, let alone like an integration, because an intern wants to copy data, right? I would say that pushed me into digital health, because I knew that I wasn't alone, that there were a lot of practitioners around the world who knew how things could be done better. I'm pretty sure like you are a practitioner yourself as well, and you moved into this space. And I knew that the industry was just stifling innovation at a rate never before seen, and that something had to be done about it.
So tell me a bit more about that last comment you made on the industry stifling innovation. What do you mean by that?
If we take the infrastructure of what we have in a hospital, like specifically digital health, right? Like, and I tell this again and again, which is a practitioner or a doctor, by providing care, like they read a lot, they understand what to do, and then they provide care. That's one part of that. They're like one small cog in the wheel, right? Like, I really think there is a lot more potential to deliver better care by making systemic changes in the whole system, like how care is delivered, when it is delivered, and small interventions go a long way. So when you take a look at the infrastructure of what we have, we usually only have like two ways to do things. One is you go ahead and you procure a big system that does everything for you, like think Epic or Oracle Cerner or one of these big systems. You expect them to do almost everything. On the other hand, you have people who build things from scratch. Like, these are institutes that can afford more funds to a particular project, and they build everything from scratch, right? So what happens is that the lifetime of an application, like the useful lifespan of an application, whether be it like something that they bought or something that was built in house, happens to be around 10 years. And the reason here is multifold. So one of it being, like, if you build it by yourself, you have churn. Like, people leave your organization, and then like someone new joins in, and they have no idea what this application is doing and how this is working, so they just rebuild the entire stack. The other reality is that requirements also keep changing. Like, every 10 years you see this complete shift in like how things are done, like how the insurance and the hospital networks work with each other. So there is this whole shift that keeps happening every 10 years. You're kind of stuck in this mess. So, like, coming back to your question, like, why is this anti innovation? It's simple, because like, if you go with one single vendor or one single person who's offering everything, then they control what you can do and what you can't do, right? And the US has been trying to push these people to expose more APIs, and they've just been very resistant to this. Like, they're like, no, we're not going to do it. And in other countries, you're at the mercy of what these big vendors allow you to do in order for you to even implement new workflow patterns. So on the other hand, like, if you're inventing and if you're building it yourself, there is scope for innovation, and you're able to go and do something. But then the technical debt is just so high that, again, it usually hangs in a fine balance, and people don't want to touch it because it's like, they don't know when things will fall. So you have that other mentality where, we don't want to make any changes because, like, we are good as it is. So I think these two forces basically stifle innovation quite a bit.
I just wanted to touch on the comment you made around the technical debt in these sort of more bespoke solutions, because I think from a clinician standpoint, often we might approach that being like, that's a great idea. I have a complex workflow. I wish someone would work alongside me to describe that, model it, and then deploy it. So what is so wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that per se, but what happens is that when a clinician tries to directly model software, more often than not, they do not understand the abstraction layer in which this is to be modeled. They don't understand which things change often and which things don't. It's completely fine that they don't, because in from their perspective, they want a particular functionality, they want it to work. So when they sit down and talk to a developer, and when they are talking about their requirements on how to build something, more often than not, they tell the developer, like, this is exactly what I need. I need this table to look a certain way. I need this patient list to show up in a certain way. And I want to click here and I want this button. But what happens here is that the developer is also like at a loss here, because like they don't know that these are temporary requirements. This will change in another 5 years. The way they look at things will change. The data points that are important to them will change, right? So what happens is that the developers start modeling all of these requirements right in the data. When the practitioner says that, hey, I need to capture the temperature and I need to capture the body weight of this, that's literally a table in the database, hard coded in the software that they are building. These are fields in the software that they're building. 5 years go by and this developer finds a better job, because big tech is offering this same developer a much more lucrative pay, and this developer leaves, and the next developer comes in, and then he looks at this mess that he has built. And again, it's not it's not a mess according to the practitioner because like it just works, but then it works according to the workflow that's in this practitioner's head, right? So as soon as this practitioner leaves and then there is another practitioner who comes in, the workflow is completely different. I don't think two or three practitioners can really agree on a perfect workflow together, let alone like a group of practitioners and developers. So I think there is this friction, and they abstract at the wrong level, right? So that leads to, I would say, software rot in a sense, like it doesn't age well.
Often when these projects do get started too, this person, this clinician or whoever is maybe doing this part-time or out of hours. They don't necessarily have dedicated time to work alongside this, and perhaps don't have a lot of experience as well. And so, as you say, it's kind of like getting somebody to design a house, but they've only ever been in one house before, and they're trying to design their dream house. And they want a pool over there and they want a wall over there, and the developer's just going, cool, okay, we'll put it up, we'll put it up, we'll put it up. And in 5 years' time, a different family moves in, and the rooms don't fit and it doesn't make sense. So I can kind of hear how that comes through. There are other options, things like a best of breed, where you perhaps try to chunk some of these things down and just create integrations between them. What are the sort of pros and cons of that kind of approach?
I think your house example was really good. And I actually want to extend that a bit because it's not just that they're building the house in a certain way. So, the house being the infrastructure, so we can think about the software or the application that they're building, but you are actually collecting a real resource here, which is the data, right? Like the data is the real valuable asset that you are storing, right? So what happens is that when a particular developer or a software engineer builds all of the requirements and all of the data models around a particular specification that this particular practitioner came up with, this data is going to be completely different from what another practitioner would just come up with by themselves. And that again is the problem with best of breed software, right? Like, so what's happening is that two different vendors providing two different software for the same hospital, they don't represent the same data in the same way, right? So you have, let's say, an acute care software like representing diagnosis. They might represent it in a completely different way from another inpatient software that's taking care of the patient once they're admitted and once they are in the wards. If data is not consistent across these two systems, what you have is this n into n problems. I like this diagram where you have like the more number of nodes you have and the more number of nodes that need to talk with each other, the number of vertices that you can draw between these nodes grows exponentially. If you have a central hub or if you have a central repository and everybody talks the same language, it's just the number of different best of breeds that you have. But when you don't have that and these best of breeds need to integrate and talk with multiple other best of breeds, it becomes an integration nightmare because then you have like n into n, right? Like the number of best of breeds to the power 2, like that's the number of integrations that you have to build. And these integrations are not cheap, right? Like they're not cheap in terms of money, time, or the accuracy of the data transmitted, because you're losing context, you're losing information when you're translating from one particular data model into another.
And I think for people who may be not super familiar with some of these aspects, you could imagine a form, and that form has some label from, name, past medical history, medications, allergies, or what have you. And you can imagine the same form kind of telling you the same thing with slightly different language, moved around in the fields in a slightly different way, reordered in another way as well. And what that means is translating those things across, as you say, you lose the fidelity, the accuracy, and it creates a lot of noise in the system. And as you say, with these best of breeds, if one is updating tomorrow and the other one's going to update in 3 months' time, you need to know what's changed to make sure that those integrations are still working appropriately.
I can give you a few examples here actually. Like, for example, let's take medication, right? Like a very common item that's recorded almost in all healthcare IT software. Medication, some people like to record the dosage of the medication in the name of the medication. Let's say paracetamol 500 mg. is in one field, and then they have the regimen and so on. Then some other people come along and they represent paracetamol separately, and then the dosage or the form in another two fields. So when you're translating, you kind of have this loss of information, especially because sometimes the people who record all of this in one field, they do not have the dosage information there, or maybe someone mistyped it and it's not 500 mg anymore, it's 500 ng, or like things can go wrong anywhere. Blood pressure is another common example. Some people like to just represent blood pressure as a text field, and then they just write 180 by 60, right? Like there is this slash. But actually, like if you look at the data model and what the clinicians are trying to represent, it's actually two separate values. Like that's the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure. But when a doctor or when a practitioner talks to a developer, they say like, this is how blood pressure is supposed to be recorded. It's 160 by 80. The developer doesn't know any better, so they're like, oh, that's supposed to be a text field.
It sounds like so easy to happen, right? And I'm sure is happening. I guess I'd want to move on to this idea of a healthcare data platform. So what is that new kind of paradigm about thinking about this kind of macro level of health IT systems?
Before we talk about data platforms, I think there is this important concept of representing data models globally in the same sort of way. So if there is blood pressure or if there is medication, we got to kind of agree on how we are going to represent this globally, right? Because healthcare is the same, the human body is the same, and we are representing the same kind of information almost everywhere. So these global data models are extremely important, and I think that's where projects like OpenEHR really shine. Because, like for example, they have more than 1,000 of these data models modeled already, and they have this clinical knowledge manager which represents what this is supposed to look like. So this is the clinical knowledge manager. If you take a look at UPCAR score, for example, they talk about like, okay, respiratory effort is 0 is absent, 1 is weak, 2 is normal, and the line codes for that, right? So somebody has to do this effort to actually understand that, okay, UPCAR score is a data model, and you're supposed to represent it with this particular type, and these are the different fields that are available. So once you have these data models, these maximal data models, and again, like I say maximal because the way FHIR or some other standards do it is they just look at a particular use case and then they derive the fields based on the use case, right? So that's not any different from a doctor talking to a developer and just coming up with the fields on the fly.
So there's sort of helpful constraints in the OpenEHR because it's narrowing it down to typical clinical workflows and scenarios such that that clinician has firm footing to then describe what their needs are rather than, an infinite number of ways of describing what they'd like to do.
Exactly. So this is just like not reinventing the wheel every single time. Like how many times do people need to reinvent the, let's say, the ECG result data type, or for example, the fluid input output data type? Like I think it's the same. Like so just invent it once, agree on this, have a global agreement on the fact that this is how we will represent blood pressure or UPCAR score or Glasgow Coma scale from now on, and then just reuse these data models in the applications that you're building. And that's where the data platform comes into play. So the idea behind the data platform is that you come up with a set of standard APIs, or you come up with a set of standards that you can use to access this standard information, right? So you model it in a certain way, you put that in a repository that keeps evolving, that keeps growing. You have constant or consistent APIs to access this information, right? So once you have both of these, like you have consistent data models and you have consistent APIs, then all of your different use cases and apps that you have can just be built as applications on top of this data platform. So what we mean by a data platform is it has a consistent way to store the data, and it exposes a consistent API to access this data.
When you're talking about consistent APIs, is that around the FHIR standard, or is there something?
It can be anything. Like at this moment, FHIR and OpenAir are coming out to be on the top, but it doesn't matter. The concept of the health data platform stays the same, which is like you have a consistent set of APIs to access the data that you want. and you give people full access to these APIs. For example, a person building a primary care EHR would not build all the data models and rebuild all of this from scratch. They would just use these APIs and they will commit data in the format that is already present in the CKM. So that way, when another application, like let's say an inpatient monitoring application, wants to access this data that the primary care EHR committed, they can do so from the same data platform, and they have all of this data in their wrap as well.
Going back to those other approaches, it really highlights that the things about being able to innovate and to change as practices change, policy, law, any of those types of things change. Your applications can change, but you can have this underlying infrastructure that is accessible and more consistent.
Exactly. So we are seeing this concept of a headless EHR now. So which is like the EHR just happens to be a platform that stores data, like it allows access through APIs, and it doesn't do much. Like you don't need the EHR to have hundreds of different built-in workflows. It's not this bulky thing that you purchase. It's a slimmed out version which just has the bare minimum for you to build things on top of.
And so, how are you seeing this in your space actually being implemented, and is it sort of living up to that potential?
There are countries that have started adopting health data platforms at country levels, right? Like we are seeing recently Sweden announced that they are going all in on OpenAIR based data platforms. We are seeing Spain, Brazil, the whole city of Moscow today runs on health data platforms like OpenAIR. There have been really big success stories. But again, I think we need to focus on the fact that this is not yet the default way of building in healthcare. People look at this as a not so traditional way to build. Like they usually prefer just procuring the systems. And I think there is still some amount of education that people need and understand that, okay, these headless data platforms can work. And I think AI is changing this quite a bit, right? Like, because we are seeing that the advantage that a lot of these big name EHRs have is that they've modeled the workflows well. They modeled like the ability to retrieve data back well. But how big of a moat is that really? Right. So they've put in hours and hours of effort into building all of these different forms and building all of these different UIs and like these charts. But then today AI is able to like do that on top of any API, right? Like you can talk with like ChatGPT, and patients are able to talk to their data immediately. Practitioners are able to like model what exactly they want to capture through AI. And I think this whole concept of the user interface and what it means to be a user interface is changing really fast. And I don't know, like maybe in the next 4 to 5 years it'll be completely different. Like it may not be people interacting with screens and doing 1,000 clicks. It would probably be people expressing intent and an agent doing things for them. So in a future that is powered by agents and by things that can it can understand what you mean, it makes even more sense to have a headless EHR. Like it just is good at storing data, it's good at retrieving data, and it has a proper format of storing this. And like, again, AI is not going to come up with this format for you. You still need agreement between different parties or what it means to be a blood pressure reading. I think it's changing really fast, and AI is pushing this even more than like the traditional reasons to adopt a data platform, which is usually independence from vendors and just the ability to persist data across applications. And like even if an application is replaced, you still have the data, and the data follows, and it's for life. Yeah, I think adoption is picking up really fast, but AI in the next 4 to 5 years might just break through things much quicker.
AI is really Fascinating topic in this space. And I think, for the longest time, patients have never really had a good handle on their data, right? It's always been the custodians of the vendors often, or the doctors, or whoever. And so that opportunity to break down that barrier and empower patients to make choices and control how they use and share that information is super exciting. I guess one of the challenges in healthcare, and I'm sure you experience this, the information asymmetry in terms of meaning. What does it mean to have these conditions, and how do I actually use that information to make choices? Because some of those choices, I think, can lead to what's called low value care. So, over servicing prescriptions and surgeries and all of these kinds of things that people don't necessarily need. And so, AI is this funny kind of lubricant in this space, which has a lot of potential in it, but it also could exacerbate, inequalities across populations, and also enhance the amount of low value care that is being asked for, because the AI doesn't necessarily have the same approach to clinical judgment. Now, I'm always careful with some of these sorts of comments because it's always a period in time, and who knows what's going to happen kind of tomorrow. What's your kind of take on, I guess, some of those limitations that we have, at least in those types of dynamics?
I definitely think it's an enabler, right? Like it allows you to do a lot more 30 to 40 years ago. The only way for people to get information about anything was probably to look it up in a book, right? They need to have access to a book. They need to know which book to look up, and they need to understand the language in a book. Then we had the internet era, right? So we had and this explosion of information, and with smartphones people had information at their fingertips. Like you could literally look up all the knowledge in this world today on your phone if you wanted to. And again, that brings both pros and cons. Like you have people who misdiagnose themselves with, I don't know, cancer because they have a headache because of like incomplete or improperly configured websites. But then you also have people who really connect with their peer groups of people who have similar illnesses, and you have people who are getting a lot of value out of this. Especially like people with rare genetic conditions, they can't find these kind of people anywhere else in the world. So like they have to have a global community that like just talks and like is able to take care of each other, right? So with AI, I think we are seeing a similar jump. Like it increases accessibility to information. It's not locked in the technical jargon anymore. Like AI is able to translate this for you in something that a 5-year old or an 8-year old can understand. Once you have access to the data, you don't need to understand what this data looks like. AI is able to interpret that for you, and then it's able to come up with recommendations on what you want to do. So I think more than anything, it just enables people a lot more. And people now have the option to trust another agent that's able to like interpret this for them, right? And there have been multiple instances where people have gone to multiple doctors, they've not had a right diagnosis, and then they're like, the doctors have basically given up on them and they don't really know what's going wrong with them. And then they just type their complaints and they type their whole history with all of their reports into chat gpt, and it's able to come up with a diagnosis that the doctors hadn't made in like over 10 to 15 years of them seeing this patient. Now, incidents like this are not uncommon, right? Like we are seeing this, and I think there's been a lot of Twitter threads on people reporting that this AI literally saved my son's life, or this AI diagnosed something that the doctors couldn't. My take on this is that the AI doesn't need to be better than the best doctor. The AI just needs to be better than the average doctor to provide even value when it comes to diagnostics and like really advanced thinking. But when it comes to just accessibility in general, and for the patient to understand what they have and have that uh, relationship with their data and their condition, like I think there was a study which concluded that people talking to an AI chatbot about just their condition, they felt a lot safer and a lot more heard than people chatting with real doctors, right? Because the AI chatbot just has like infinite time to answer everything in as much detail, whereas the doctor has to attend to 20 other patients. I think it's a net positive, at least currently. There might be other negatives that come from it, but I don't know. I think that's bound to happen with any technology powerful or worthy enough about talking about.
Yeah, I think I read similar studies about they felt that they got more empathy. There was other ones where they used them to rewrite patient information and consent forms and doing all of these sorts of things that empower patients to make better choices, I think is a huge win. Now, of course, we do know with these systems about how they have hallucinations. And because those hallucinations are so far afield from even just a minor or normal mistake, I guess, that a human might make, there is that kind of challenge of what are we willing to tolerate for those agents in those scenarios with how they help people. And then the other piece is around, these systems as they're obviously trained on masses and masses and masses amount of data. And in medical school, we were sort of trained to think, if you hear hooves, think horses. Now you've given a perfect example of, well, actually, in some people, it's a zebra. These systems, depending on how they're calibrated, might be searching for zebras all the time and might find a few, which is great, but also might create a whole lot of tests and worry and all of those kinds of things. So it's going to be really, really fascinating to see how these things break through that paradigm. And I think as clinicians, we're going to need to think of what an augmented world looks like, not only for our own workflows, where these tools can be supporting us, but also recognizing that our patients are talking to their family before they see a doctor. They're Googling before they're texting a friend. They're trying something their auntie told them to do. They're doing a lot of healthcare activity before they even come in to see us. And this is going to be part of that kind of ecosystem. And so we need to understand it so that patients can get the care that they need. And obviously health systems across the world are screaming out for more resourcing and more staffing and all these sorts of things. So if we can utilize these tools for people to stay well at home, that's a win-win. So just staying on the AI thread just for a little bit longer, in the health IT space, we don't see the likes of Apple or Google or Amazon really dominating these areas. Why do you think it's not the case that those sorts of big companies have been able to break in?
And I don't think it's for the lack of trying, to be honest. I think they've all at some point, maybe not Apple, but Google had an EHR product, if you remember it. Amazon has a lot of health informatics products, even right now on AWS. Healthcare is at a phase right now where the practitioners themselves don't agree on what the actual workflow should be, and they don't agree on what the proper modality of care or what exactly needs to be done across the world. Like, there are differences in what needs to happen. That lack of standardization around what happens is one of the reasons why big tech can't really operate well on healthcare data. And I think, like, it's so much easier for big tech to work on just like user clicks on a website, or all of these other types of data, because it's uniform, it's easy to make sense of, it's it's there, it's pretty obvious what this means. But when it comes to healthcare, I think the amount of effort that you need to put in order to just translate the data from one system into a standard format and like another system, I think the return on investment is very low. So for someone to have to do all that only to get paid in, like, I don't know, maybe cents on the dollar, I don't know, like, so maybe they don't see this as a good return on investment. And again, that's where I think, like, once you have standard offerings and standard data models and standard APIs, and I think that's happening right now. Like, for example, Apple Health integrated with thousands of hospitals in the US overnight through the use of Fire APIs. So if you look at the Apple Health option in your iPhone, you're able to actually connect with real hospitals, and you're able to pull this data into your Apple Health system. And Google Fit does the same thing. AWS is now working on a Fire based data repository that they are now offering to people. Tech can't operate without these standards. It's the same problem again. Like, you need the headless EHR to become the norm, especially for big tech to like start immediately plugging in and delivering value, as opposed to like just doing the grunt work of like transforming data or converting it. And again, there is not much return on investment there.
What do you see the role of policy in these sorts of spaces to enhance this move and unlock a lot of this data and make it meaningful?
Policy plays a huge role because like we've seen that it has worked in the past. Let's take for instance the Spanish procurement that's going on for open air based systems. It's because of policy. It's because like they want an open air standard, and they have mandated that they need this OpenEHR API standard and API data models. In the US, as a patient, you are able to access your own health records because of the information blocking requirements set out by the ONC. So there are regulations that mandate that EHRs are supposed to allow programmatic access of the patient's own information. And that's why Apple Health was able to do what they were able to do. EHRs and big health IT vendors in healthcare are monopolistic by nature. And it's run by an oligopoly of like a few people who control all of this, the market. So they tend to want to keep the data locked in because the data is what is valuable here. As long as they keep the data locked in, and as a user, as a doctor, you're not able to do what you want with the data. Epic charges researchers to access the data that the same institute spent thousands of hours storing. So they're not a good custodian of data. Like they charge you for accessing this information, and getting this data out and putting it into another system is almost close to impossible. Literally locking your data away and holding it for ransom. So that thought, once it enters people's minds, and once they start looking at open alternatives and like more standard APIs and headless EHRs, and there's a lot of open source solutions that are really good today, along with the workflows on top, whether be it by apps and UI built by humans or like just automatically generated by AI. Once that comes into the picture, then you will start seeing a revolution. You'll start seeing innovation move forward, and people can do what they want to do with the data.
Have you seen any examples of policy really cracking those big players up and unlocking that data? I know you mentioned Apple before, but is that just a small crack in the dam, or is these sort of multiple cracks, or what does that kind of look like?
We are in the time where it's happening. In the US, for example, the law exists, but then there are complaints being raised that some people block information, but then action is not immediately being taken on them. But then the threat of a lawsuit keeps these EHRs to like open up the data. They do that. Recently, there was a lawsuit by Particle Health on Epic, and I think that's an interesting one to follow. I think they sued Epic that they had monopolistic practices, and they were basically like violating antitrust laws. I don't know what will happen out of this lawsuit, but I think like at least people are waking up.
And so, tell me about Medblocks. Where did this come from, and what are you doing at Medblocks?
So Medblocks, our goal is to just make health data platform the de facto way in which people start innovating. Whenever they think about digital health transformation and solutions for a healthcare enterprise, I want them to adopt health data platforms. So we provide the tools, the training, the services that are needed in order to apply health data platforms, whether be it a government setting or a big hospital chain or a small clinic. We want it to be as simple and easy as possible. So a lot of our work has been to create awareness by putting out content and training materials for people to actually use health data platforms, helping with open source implementations that they can just like take it and use it immediately. So for example, we have our Medblocks stack, which is completely open source. Anyone can just take it and run their own health data platform in a matter of minutes. And on top of that, it's not enough to just provide them with training and the tools and product. They also need a team of people who can provide services and help people out once they have adopted health data platforms. So right now, like Epic has a huge team of consultants who will help with an Epic implementation. That's not the case for health data platforms because it's so new. But we need to train those people up and keep them ready so that when health data platforms do become the de facto way to do things, you have a team who can go in and implement this and see that the customers are successful.
What have you learned, or what sort of surprised you about this journey, going from medicine into the clinical informatics space and now running an organization? What are the surprises that you've learned along that way?
Personally, it has been a journey of just working and doing something with your head down and just like seeing patients, to thinking of the systems as a whole. How should we deliver care as a system? Like looking at the bigger picture. The more I look at it, the more I feel that healthcare is broken, and the incentive models are all wrong. And so I think we are just at the start of this journey. And I think health data platforms, and what I want to do right now with Medblocks, is just like, you're not even going to be able to look at value based care if you can't unlock the data, and if you have these big monopolies sitting. And until I can confidently say that there is an alternative, there is no way to like even go beyond this basic thing, right? For me, it's about the entire journey. Like, I want to be able to provide care that's fair, that's affordable, that's of extremely good quality. And I think like this is just one small bit of the puzzle. And I think a lot of people who are viewing this today might be in the space, and they might be actively working on different solutions. I really like this book. Like, it's called Innovator's Prescription by Clayton Christensen, and I absolutely think they got at least the problems right. Like, what problems we have with healthcare. I want to see, at least in my lifetime, I want to see healthcare change towards a more equitable system where we are able to do things well, and we are able to deliver better care as a system. That shift happened when I started looking at it more from the systemic perspective, as opposed to just like one doctor in the system providing care.
Yeah, and I can imagine that is so much more exciting and kind of fulfilling, right? To be able to have that kind of mission, and it sounds like with the work that you've been doing, to start really living that mission in the work that you're delivering. I guess as we sort of round out a little bit of the conversation here, obviously you've got your own podcast as well as Medblocks and being on YouTube as well. If somebody was to start thinking, maybe they're just right at the beginning and they say, hey, this is quite interesting stuff. I'm working clinically, but maybe I could be moving into some of these other spaces. Where would you tell them to start to just get maybe the head around some of these types of topics?
First, understanding the whole data side of things is pretty important. Like, at least understand what standards are available. Look at FHIR, look at OpenEHR, look at SNOMED CT, LOINC. Like, understand the data part of things, right? Like, once you understand the data side of things, getting more into the APIs and so on, we do have multiple training programs where we help people from clinical backgrounds transition to more of a health IT, and they're able to actually build apps. But the other part is to understand the workflows and understand the healthcare industry as a whole, understanding the bigger picture. So, even for people who are not in the healthcare domain and they're coming into this, understanding the bigger picture of like what exactly goes on. Like, for example, in India, fee for service is a very common model, right? In the US, like, it's like insurance based care. And, I'm not sure. I think in New Zealand, it's mostly government sponsored insurance. So, like, understand what goes on in the system and the different incentives that are pulling people apart, and like what's going on. Once you understand all of this, you have enough tools to really start hammering at the different nails that you see in the healthcare system. And I really think like being able to build is really important. I think you've done this transition yourself. Maybe you can also add a few points. But again, like, I have a lot of content available on my YouTube channel for those who are interested. Maybe like could put a link or something in the description here.
Yeah, absolutely. I will do. I guess the last question is, what do you see for Medblocks in the next couple of years? What's kind of exciting you about the growth or particular projects or things that are on the horizon?
Oh God, we are just like we have so much going on right now that I don't even know how we are going to deliver all of this. Like, we have a project with the Catalonian government, we have one with the German government, we have like multiple projects in the US going on. Let alone like in India, we have like multiple hospital chains that we are working on. So it's been a sudden and explosive growth. I really wish that it didn't happen. It's this fast, because like it's just so hard to like now find people, like train them on FHIR, OpenEHR, and then make them understand like, hey, go and deliver this result in this hospital. But then when I see that it has the potential to actually like I finally look at the stakeholders and they're happy and they actually get what they want. And they're like, hey, yeah, you know what? This is a system that has worked out for us. And previously we weren't able to do this. And that brings me so much joy. I think I just want to do this a lot more. I just need more people. I just need more resources to like actually execute. But yeah, this year has been crazy.
Awesome. Well, Sidharth, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Jano, and take care.
And that brings us to the end of the podcast. If you want to go deeper about any of these topics or join in on the discussion, visit our website, clinicalchangemakers.com, or our YouTube channel. Finally, if you enjoyed our work, please give us a rating and share your favourite episode with a friend or colleague. Until next time, take care.